Cool. Well, Jack, thank you for talking to me here. I know we've, for those who won't know this and won't realise this, I know
no one's going to know this because like the other one didn't work,
exactly.
so this is like take two.
But yeah, we've been here before, so
we have
at any point
in the exact position we're in.
So if at any point, this is obviously for the viewers, if at any point I sort of say, as we discussed before, or as we talked about the other day, or whatever, that's what I'm referring to.
Yeah,
just in
it's
case
a bit
people
of a
think,
disclaimer.
have I missed something? What have I missed a video where you've discussed things?
No, they haven't.
No,
there's no part 1 or part 2 to this. Hopefully.
There's a silent video where if you can lip read, you can figure out what we are talking about. So thank you.
Before we do start, I'll just quickly congratulate you on your pass of 8,000 subscribers.
Yeah. 2,000 more, and I'll be at 10,000, which is obviously the next level in YouTube land of getting perks and things.
But then it's going to go up to 100,000.
Exactly.
Just like we discussed last time.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's have a look. You're currently on 8,016, so you're doing quite well for yourself.
Yeah.
Because when we spoke, you were on 7,980.
Yeah. So I think I'm getting about 350-ish subscribers a month, so not too bad. It needs to be going up a little bit faster, really. But you know, it's,
I know the feeling.
It's better than nothing.
Mine doesn't have a set number by how many it goes up a day. So I mean, at least you've got an estimate.
Yeah. But I think that's something. It's one of those things that it takes so much hard work. I have to post 3 videos a week. If I miss a video or two, suddenly it really negatively impacts everything, and it takes a lot to get back into the swing of it.
The way I'm looking at this is it's probably going to be a bonus video off on your channel.
Yeah. So
bonus video happens to what you normally do.
Hopefully to post it on Friday, so people watching this will
hear me say that. Hopefully it goes up. Think, it's Friday today, and I'm watching this. He was right. So with any luck, that's what will happen, and it won't go up late. You are in the process of writing a book. So if you say a bit about yourself first of all, and about this book you're in the process of writing.
Yeah, I'm 17 years old. I've been diagnosed with Asperger's for, as far as I can tell, all of my known life. And, I have a lot of hobbies. I enjoy singing. I sort of aim to hopefully one day become a pretty famous singer or actor sort of thing. Because, who cares about normal jobs? Who cares about normal jobs? Probably no one.
I think it's always good to aim high, because obviously if everyone just aims for mediocrity, no one achieves anything.
Well, the backup plan is to hopefully one day make a living off YouTube, if anything. But I also write novels, but what I'm writing at the moment is an autobiography on my life and on my experience with Asperger's. So I know you'll ask the question later, so I'll put it out there now, because you asked it on Monday. I have not got an expected release date for it.
So no release date.
No.
And
no, I haven't got a release date. It's also slow progress as well, because I have other things which I run in the background. One of those obviously being YouTube.
So what sort of things do you do on your YouTube channel?
It's interesting because, like, on my old channel before it sadly perished because it got deleted by hackers, which is disappointing. I did a wide variety of stuff. I mean, like, the ambition was, I'll go in, I'll do some gaming videos, I'll hopefully get big really quickly, and then I realized the truth of, like, oh wait, this is actually not going to be so simple to, like, get big and get famous off it, but it's still really fun to do. And slowly over time, I sort of developed into all sorts of gaming. I then ended up doing vlogs and singing videos. Interestingly, a lot of the videos I did, because I wasn't very good at editing, I had to either just be like, right, I'll completely murder the internet and just upload these hour-long videos. But then when I got my laptop, obviously, I then sort of went back into gaming territory a bit, because the camera I used, while good, it was also a nightmare to find the footage from. So I think now what I tend to go into is, I tend to do gaming more than anything else, and you will end up finding very shit videos on YouTube I can make a commentary and take the piss out of them with. I've not really found any yet, but one hopes I'll find them soon, or I'll just go take the mick out of someone else's gaming video and be like, this is actually really bad and stuff, and I'll just take the piss out of them and probably get a load of angry emails or something. If you link me a Minecraft one, tell you what, if you link me a Minecraft one later, I will go and make a video on it, and then I'll link it to you.
Taking the mickey out of, I am the worst person at games in the world. And on Minecraft, my Minecraft videos are sort of really what you're seeing is my obsession. It's like, look at this giant pyramid I built with about 3 million blocks that I've spent.
You get plenty of adults who do this sort of thing on YouTube. They do these gaming videos, or they do these kinds of videos, and they'll become known for a certain character. With me, I'm just like, I don't want there to be a character, I just want to be my crazy lunatic-like self, and, if... I think one of the most popular sort of games I would stream on my old channel would be Cards Against Humanity online, because, it was just a very simple game, and I think that was one of the others I would stream a lot on the laptop as well, because before my channel met its fate, this is what I used for recording, streaming, gaming. So that's probably what I would tend to stream the most alongside Minecraft, and each time the stream would be popular, I'd get the players... It was easier to get the players involved with that, because a lot of the time I streamed Minecraft, it was either on the multiplayer things I wasn't very good at, but I could still get the players in, or it was on a server which I was hoping to create, but was still sort of being developed or not very populated. So it's just like, there's not really much here, so I don't want to do one of those multiplayer things, so I'll go stream Cards Against Humanity. And, the streams did turn out very popular as well.
So your book, there's no sort of deadline to when it's going to come out, but... what was sort of behind deciding to write a book?
I think, obviously, as I explained last time, a lot of the inspiration came from just, reading a couple of your pages and just, a couple of pages of look into my eyes. Again, I've got no props, because I can't be bothered, really. Sorry, because I can't then advertise it, even though this is going up on your channel.
What my book is, hopefully.
Well, then there's... Yeah. No... a lot of it came from reading a couple of pages of that and being like, okay, I'm going to write this, see how it goes, and I started writing it in a car as we were going up to Yorkshire for a holiday. Because, why not? We were going up there. We were taking both the dogs up, and the car was absolutely cramped. We had the small dog in the middle seat, and he was constantly just trying to lay on the keyboard. And I even included that in the introduction. I'm just like, so I'm writing this in a car with a dog laying on my keyboard. So, it's an interesting sort of perspective that, you get, these sparks of inspiration out of, in some ways, nowhere. And I think that's what happened here. I read a couple of pages of yours. I've not read any more pages since, actually, because I'm just... sorry. And because I'm okay, let's not read any other autobiographies. Let's not go and read any more of them or anything like that. Let's go try writing my own, hopefully get it released at some point, and then go and read them and compare mine. Which is interesting as well, because I think that's sort of the main route I would have wanted to take it, even if I had thought about doing it. I'd read, maybe a few pages of yours or someone else's, like Mark Kermode's, because I think that's the only other sort of one I've got.
But when it comes to people who are on the spectrum writing books, most of them are by females, which I find quite interesting, given that the majority of people, the largest percentage of people that are diagnosed are males. So something I've got in feedback in relation to my book is a lot of parents saying, it's been a real insight into my son's behaviours and my son's thought processes and things like that, because they weren't able to find a male perspective in writing. That although more males are diagnosed, they just couldn't find that male perspective. And so I think someone like you, who's much younger, I'm writing it reflecting back over 20 years to be talking about what I was up to at your age and what I was thinking at your age. Whereas you're talking about that here and now, and you're much closer to be able to talk about what you were like when you were younger. I can barely remember when I was young. So I think, that's one selling point you've got, that you're a young person, essentially, writing about something from your perspective, not a professional saying, here's how you treat someone with autism or Asperger's, here's how they think, here's why they do this, here's why they do that. So, I just think that obviously when you do get it written, it'll be a huge resource and hopefully something easily marketable, because it's going to be so helpful to people because of your age, largely, and being male.
Yeah.
And you will be in a rare company, being a male who's written, hopefully an insightful autobiography, showing the, obviously one thing we talked about last time, which we'll talk about again, is showing some of the challenges that you have to face through life, through growing up.
Yeah, a lot of those challenges I'm going to be able to put down in the book, because the Asperger's itself didn't really take much of an effect until sort of, I'd say midway through secondary school is when I finally actually acknowledged, this is part of me. The rest of the time I'm just like, I want this to go away. And I mentioned that when we spoke on my channel. I think the interesting thing behind that is that, no matter what happens really, you can't escape it, but also you do have to at one point learn to accept it. And when I did look back, sort of subconsciously, and I look back now being like, okay, I can sort of see these challenges I faced. How many of them do I still face today? It's interesting because, the more you think about it, the sort of more confusing the answer would get, at least from my perspective. And, obviously I'd be able to put the challenges back then down in writing. Can I say they continue on today? Maybe, maybe not.
And
that sort of depends on things as a whole.
Different parts of your life means that, and different stages of life means that there are some things that are more in your control. So when you're of certain ages, you sort of you're forced to be in situations that maybe cause part of the problem. So in school, for example, you're forced to have to go into the classrooms you've got to go into to have the lessons you've got to have. And so if those lessons are causing you a problem, or those teachers in those lessons are causing you a problem, you're more likely to kick off and cause a problem back. Not necessarily because you're doing a bad thing or being a bad person, but just because you're getting anxious or angry or whatever. Whereas when you're an adult, or when you're out of that environment, you have more control, largely, like with work. It's harder when you get into a high-paid job where there's less equivalent jobs. But when you're first in work and it's like, well, I'm going into a job on minimum wage or near enough minimum wage, so whether I go into that job or that job or that job, they're all minimum wage. I get paid the same anyway. So you have more freedom to think, no, actually, this job pisses me off, or these people annoy me, I'm changing jobs. At least you got some of that freedom, whereas in school you can't do that. You can't just sort of think, I'm changing school tomorrow because this one annoys me, or these people annoy me.
No, and, that is a very complicated sort of thing. I mean, obviously, I think in secondary school, certainly I think in the early stages, when I think there were still the problems a bit more blaring before I could learn to control them a bit, people did give... I remember we had a geography trip to Gunwharf Keys, and just I hated Gunwharf anyway. But a teacher who I really got on with was also on the trip, and I got along with the teacher I had anyway, but she's just if you want to, you can go with this teacher, because I know you get on with you. I'm just I should be alright, really. And I was, but I was appreciative that she sort of gave the offer, because that's something you have to deal with, because when you get that sort of offer from, I think that proves to be more of an advantage, because they're then sort of able to be like, okay, we're sort of able to try and help him with a possible situation that could go horribly wrong. So we'll give him the option, and, if he chooses not to take it, then he chooses not to take it. That's the only situation I can really think back to, because, it's just like, okay, we'll give him the offer just in case that sort of situation arises, and then if he chooses to say no and he's alright, then he knows we've given him the offer for it.
Time, but how did you find out that you had Asperger's? How did it come about? Because obviously you were diagnosed very young, and so it's like, were you told at that time, so you just always knew, and you don't even necessarily remember being told, or was there an age where they...
I think from what I can remember, I wrote in my book, I think I was told passively, but I think the main way I sort of found out was, we had a room sort of at my primary school. We had like an art room, which is sort of like separated off from the main sort of classrooms. In there, like, in a very easy view for people who were just sort of nosy and intrigued, like me, I guess. They had like sort of medical records sort of thing. I've no idea why they had them there instead of the first aid room, but I sort of saw myself, and then I sort of read Asperger's syndrome, and I'm just like, okay. But I think the main way I found out what it was per se was, I think a lot of times I just found out on my own. That was the situation I was forced into.
That since the last session, last talk we had, I was thinking, that was something I never faced. I obviously, as an adult, gradually started learning about it. You know what it is as you get slowly diagnosed as an adult, whereas the situation I was in, because, it's just like, oh, well, I think some people are left to find out in their own way, but, it's understandable for asking the question. I sort of found out in my own way what it was, but, I was told, do you think there's any way that a parent should tell a child? So say they were diagnosed as a 3 or 4 year old, so clearly they wouldn't. You can't just say to a 3 or 4 year old, "Oh, by the way, that meeting with that person that you just had means you've got this." You can't say it then. But do you think there's any kind of way?
No, you can't tell them then. I think I'd try and recommend that as soon as they reach something like 9 or 10, and you think it's worth being able to try and sit down with them and explain it to them. You have to do it patiently, is how I think it should go. If you do it patiently and you explain it gradually to them, and you be like, okay, I don't know a great deal about this, but this is part of it, or that's part of it, or whatnot. I think that's a more ideal way for them to find out, instead of slowly finding out on their own. I think in some ways I also did make the decision to do that, and had to find out on my own, partially because I don't think anyone would have been able to tell me much about it to begin with.
Definitely useful for parents to learn as much as they can about it, to be able to help their kids.
Yes, indeed, because when you asked me this on Monday, I did say, you've got to try and figure things out slowly, and you've got to try and be patient about it. It's not easy, and I can 100% understand that, because I've mentored some people, and I can 100% suspect that, they may have Asperger's or possibly autism in some form. But obviously I'm not going to say it to them. It's not my place. But also, even if they're just mentored by someone who they can then call a friend, I think that's something more ideal than absolutely nothing.
I think it's helpful for not just the parents to educate themselves, but to figure out how age appropriately, kids can be educated about their condition, or if you're in my case, how an adult, if you suddenly get a diagnosis and you've gone saying, I've known adults who've sought diagnosis, not knowing that's what they're seeking a diagnosis for. They just go to a doctor saying, I keep struggling in work, I struggle with this, that and the other, and the doctor has said, I think you might have this, I'll refer you. And so they then get a diagnosis and don't know anything about it. And obviously then it's like, I don't know what challenges I'm going to face.
Yeah.
No,
as an adult, I can't really say for an adult, but if they got a diagnosis, if I had to try and give any advice, because I'm sort of in the middle between the two, I'd say try and learn as much as you can before you have that meeting with whoever you've been referred to. Because then at least if you are diagnosed, you have a bit of an insight, and you're not taken by surprise. That'd be the best I could say, really.
What other, obviously there's numerous challenges, but what other sort of solutions or advice would you give around some of the challenges? Like, when people find things difficult.
It sort of depends on how the challenges I've faced would affect people, because obviously everyone's challenges are different. I mean, some common ones could be somewhat distancing yourself, and when we spoke on my channel, I described, the experience of being betrayed by one of the first friends I ever had. And take that as you will, I sort of have the opinion of, okay, it wasn't traumatic, but that has forever affected my life, really. Because for a time that, and in a way still does, forces me to be cold, brutal sort of thing. But at the same time, I still contain a lot of the old personality I had before that.
So, what kind of things have helped with, I don't know, controlling? Do you get sensory overload? And what sort of, if you do, what sort of sensory overload do you get?
I don't think I've had any overload of my senses, personally. I mean, I think if I had to describe anything, if something is too loud or high-pitched, that will cause a lot of pain to my hearing, because obviously people with Asperger's do have hypersensitive hearing and sight and all that. I mean, I wear glasses, so not so much on the sight for me, but, hyper advanced sense of smell, advanced hearing sort of thing, and even touch and taste to a certain degree. No, it's the hearing that will really be the common problem, I think. If things are too loud and you don't sort of teach yourself to be able to try and adjust, then you're either going to be disturbed, you're either going to get angry, or you're going to feel a lot of pain, and that
do you
mostly
find it
comes
difficult,
from high-pitched
like
things.
if you're at a party or a location where lots of people are, to focus on the person who you're trying to hold a conversation with, when there's lots of...
No, that's easier, because I've sort of been able to teach myself to adjust and get used to that. I mean, I never really had much of an issue with that. I think I used to zone out because people would always talk a lot when doing work in primary school, so that was the time I would tend to zone out, because I was always the one who'd just be quiet and getting on with it.
When things cause you to feel anxious or get angry?
A long time ago, I would have gone on a massive rampage, and there was no way to cope. Nowadays, as I discussed last time, it's mostly through a force of will and meditation and other methods that I had a bit of training with but never completed, that I have been able to sort of become more able to control it. But also it determines, just how much of the challenges I've faced so far, how they affect other people. There's no advice you can really give, because there's nothing you can say, because you've no idea what sort of challenges people have.
And I think it's that most things boil down to causing anger or anxiety in some way. So, for example, for me, sometimes it can be, when it comes to sight, it can be that things get overwhelming because of movement. So there's too much movement. So if I go into, I don't know, a clothes shop with my wife or something, there'll suddenly be lots of people moving in all different directions everywhere, and it will suddenly feel like there's an overloading.
No, that sort of thing doesn't really affect me, because I think in sort of ways it's not able to, sort of thing, because it's not an issue in any way, shape or form. All that there is just, well, the only thing I can really say is that I've described the challenges I've faced, obviously, but I can't describe them for others. I can't give advice to others, because there's no way to determine, what sort of challenges have you got. That sort of comes with a whole degree of mentoring sort of thing as well, because people then describe to you the challenges if you ask, and then you can try and give them advice after you've been told and from what you know.
So you
and that's something I've commonly done.
Just now about the mentoring. So what sort of mentoring have you done? How have you found that? And
I have specifically mentored children in school, specifically. I mentored 2 officially and 1 unofficially. The first one who I mentored officially, I was asked to by my head of house at the time. I was completely surprised. I didn't see it coming. She just simply asked if she could borrow me during form, so I'm just like, oh, okay. Hey, and along we go to LS, and she and the head of LS are saying, can you mentor him? I'm just like, okay. I couldn't really do as much as I later was able to with like other people who I mentored, because he never really tended to talk to people, and he always tended to try and distance himself. So I couldn't really work with much, but also there was never really a fixed way I could mentor him or set up any meetings to mentor him. So that sort of slowly ended up dying out. But in a way I could still mentor him to a very certain degree, but it didn't do much.
We talked about last time was I was pointing out that given your age and everything, you'd be brilliant at going into schools and mentoring in schools, and also talking to the teachers and being able to educate teachers because of your age and being close to the school age, that especially in secondary schools, close to the school age of a lot of the kids. You'd be able to see their perspective, and you'd be able to go in, talk to the teachers, educate them about what the best role is, on how to handle things, when to back off. Which, as you said, was one of the things that seems to be the biggest issue, is people not knowing when to back off. And
another one of the biggest issues, now that you bring that up, that I notice is, even if people do back off, they still try and act like, oh, we know best, we know this. Whereas in reality, unless people choose to tell you or they've figured it out for themselves, and then they tell you, you don't know a damn thing about it, and yet you're still trying to, in some ways, impose your will upon them, be like, do this, do that. And I certainly came across that issue in primary school. I've already described a teacher I really hated it from there, and that's the exact thing she did. And, I mentioned when I interviewed you on my channel, I could think of people who were better suited for the role because they didn't try doing that. There were people who were better for it now that I look back. Obviously, at the time, I was too nice to say anything. I mean, she could see she was making me angry, and she did absolutely nothing to try and change that. And every meeting I had with her, I would get angry with her. She popped up out of nowhere and, she would try and impose her will, and I think that's another common issue, because I came across that in secondary school as well, but by then I was a bit more defiant, being like, oh, this and that, because primarily, a lot of the teachers in the learning supports at secondary school, there were good ones, and there were plenty who you could get along with. I also worked closely with one of them during particular mentoring of the second person, which I'll get to later if you wish to know. But I ended up working closely with some of them whilst mentoring or similar sort of things, really. But also, I did have to be defiant of the others, because I'm just like, they either wouldn't leave me alone. I can think of two particular cases, actually. There was one who was assigned to food tech, not for me specifically, but she came over towards me a lot, and I'm just like, in the end, I'm just like, go away, I'm going to do you for harassment, sort of thing. I think she was a bit stunned by that, because I sort of gave her a taste of reality. The other I was involved with directly, and I was not happy about it in the slightest. So, in secondary school, they offer people the chance to do touch typing. I'm simulating it by messing with my keyboard slightly, even not actually pressing anything. Because I had already sort of done a little bit of it, I think a couple of years before in year 7, I had then been told, you don't need to do it again. She tried to obviously impose her will, saying, okay, if you don't turn up, I'm going to give you a red slip, and that'll then lead to a detention. Of all the many red slips she ended up writing, only one of those detentions happened, but obviously I described this on Monday as well, that after she gave me that detention and after I did it, because it was at lunchtime, I then had 5th period science. Science teacher never really gave me enough of a chance to calm down before she gave me a faculty detention, which was for half hour the next week, and it was on the last day, and she scheduled it for the last day of term, which really pissed me off. So yeah, it's like when teachers don't give you a chance to calm down, back off, impose their will.
Something I've
straight up don't leave you alone.
Because of my parenting experience
And they know it.
as a professional, and my experience working in children's homes, something I've had a lot of experience with is people experiencing anger. And even when someone looks calm, internally they're not. So just from a chemical point of view, all of the physiological and chemical changes in your body to do with getting angry are there for many hours after you've finished officially being angry. So if you're angry, say at lunchtime, and you've calmed down by 1 p.m, inside you, all the chemicals are still flooded through your body exactly the same, and so it's really easy to re-trigger the anger.
Which is why it's easier to get angry
how many
again.
Professionals, not just I teach parents and I teach other ordinary people these things, but it's surprising how many professionals as well don't know this information or don't realise this information, or for some reason it just doesn't click with them. But it does mean that you can be angry, say at 12 o'clock, you can then be in a detention or whatever, you can come out of that, and it's incredibly easy to trigger that off again. And often what I found is that the person who's experiencing it knows that they're likely to get triggered off, and will say, if they are on the spectrum, they're often quite honest about it, and they'll say, "You are going to make me angry," and they're not saying it as a threat.
I think I said similar sort of things. So she knew, but she didn't really give enough of a chance to calm down. And this really annoyed me because she claimed she did and gave me a faculty. I think I tried screwing it up and putting it in the bin, but it didn't work.
So if I say, just using me as an example, if I say, "You are making me angry," they'll say, "You're threatening me." No, I'm telling you the honest thing. That is what's happening. And people take it as a threat.
No, it's really strange. It's really strange, the way people's minds work, that they think that they know best. And that is probably one of the real challenges that people are going to have to deal with in schools. Yes, if I were to try and arrange sort of meetings to go into schools, I would have to mention that. I would have to be honest. I would have to do talks with not just the students and teachers together, but maybe the students on their own, maybe the teachers on their own, which would be interesting because, obviously I'd have to do those talks in an assembly.
With the teachers, they would probably invite you in to a year heads meeting or some other kind of everything's frozen again, but hopefully it'll unfreeze. It's unfrozen now. They'll probably invite you in.
I am still recording, by the way, so that don't worry.
Meeting or something. Which, as I told you before about my experiences of going into a school, and the science teacher who turned up late and
there was a science teacher who was late and asked if you could stop.
This wasn't his lesson, so I told him no. You've got to catch up with the others. I'm not starting again. I've been.
Go ask one of your colleagues because I'm not wasting my time.
That's your choice. You wouldn't tolerate it if I was a student and I turned up late. So why should I tolerate it if you're a teacher and you turn up late? It's tough, and
I think when people do things like that and when they do talks like that and they say that to the teachers, it will sort of surprise them a bit because they're the ones used to being in charge. So yes, if I were to do those talks and say a head of department turned up late and they had a reason for it, I'd be like, okay, fair enough. I'll give you a quick brief summary, but you're going to have to get details from everyone else. If they just turn up blatantly late and do the similar thing that science teacher did, I'd be like, you can either stay and listen to the rest, or I'll just ask you to leave.
He may have had a legitimate reason. The fact is, he didn't come in and say, I've got a legitimate reason. He came in and just demanded that I change what I'm doing and I do what he wants, which obviously is totally unreasonable, and I'm not going to do that. Whereas had he come in and
completely unreasonable, but
was having a crisis and I had to deal with that because that was more important.
I was dealing with this or that.
Could you just catch me up on what you've discussed, or is there any notes or whatever? Then obviously I would have responded to that in that way. I wouldn't have gone over everything again. But I would have at least summarised, like you just mentioned. But would that be something that you could see yourself ever doing, going into schools, educating teachers?
It is certainly a possibility as to whether I would go ahead and do that, but also, obviously, it depends not just on my time, but the time that they would have and when they're able to try and get me in for it. So it's definitely an interesting thing that can be considered. I'm not sure I personally think it's anything I'm likely to do in the near future. Maybe after I've released the book, it's something I'll possibly look into. Also because, like, if I were to go and say to them now, okay, would you mind if I ever actually came in and did a talk? They'd probably say yes, but they'd want me to do it to their own criteria, whereas I'd have to be like, I'll try and fulfill some of it, but this largely has to be the way I want it to be. Well, and I can't sort of see that.
Spend some of my time doing already. I'll go and talk to different people, and it is always on my terms. It is always, this is what I'll cut. If they say we're having this one specific issue in the school, would you be able to come and talk about that issue? Then obviously you either say yes, I can come and talk about that issue, or in that context or whatever, or you'll say no, I can't. But generally, it's when I come in, this is what I'm going to talk about. And it definitely does help when you've got a book so that you can be introduced as, you know, so-and-so author of. It adds that extra level of credibility. Yeah.
Oh, I'd love to. I'm pretty much already a celebrity, legitimately, so I don't think that would be an issue. Yeah. Oh, my God. Yeah, move on from this topic. Move on to your next question before I embarrass myself.
As long as it makes other people laugh. Is there any sort of guidance you think a parent could give?
It would depend on the age and, like, how willing the child was to talk. Or anything, really. I wouldn't say that you should make them talk about it. It's not something you should do. I mean, if your child is willing to talk and they're willing to ask you questions and they make that decision, say, okay, I'll find out what I can, and then we'll have a chat. If they choose to go and find out on their own slowly over the period of their life, which to an extent I've decided to do, that might be how they feel more comfortable, and so they'll just choose to avoid talking about it, mostly with their parents. They might talk about it. They'll obviously talk about it with employers and they'll mention it, but I always find it annoying when my mother sort of brings up the fact that I've got it when I'm like, you know, you didn't really need to bring it out. It's just my opinion, and the only advice I can give is, if your child makes the decision and you don't know much about it, do some research. If you know a fair bit already and you are willing, and they are willing to talk about it, then by all means talk. But otherwise, you need to let them make the decision themselves.
As I think we've mentioned a couple of times, not pushing on your child, not pushing for communication.
No, you can't push them. You certainly can't push them into making that decision, certainly. Because if you push them into making that decision and things go for the worst, you're obviously going to have one massive crisis with your child because they were pressured into that decision. They're going to go and they're going to be defiant. They're probably going to, in some ways, hate you for it, and you're going to have to live with that forever because you realised only too late, I shouldn't have forced them into that decision. I can't stress enough that if they make the decision to talk, then they make the decision to talk, but otherwise you've got to leave them to figure it out on their own. It's a decision that at some point every person with Asperger's and autism in general will one day make. And I'd say the common age as to where they will make it is maybe around 13 or 14, possibly 15, but I don't see it happening any earlier or later. Because by that point they'll have been told, they largely will have either found out or have been told that they have it, and they'll have learned maybe a certain degree about it and themselves along the way.
When those questions come along, like, you know, mum, dad, whatever, I know I've got this thing, what does it mean? You know, tell me more about it, because they'll know their own personal experience of it, but obviously you have to gain a lot of insight, and you're only, as a teenager, you're still only in a stage of minimal insight into yourself. Yeah, you're not yet at that point where you're very good at analysing yourself.
Yeah.
Until you get a bit older. So having a parent, you know, if a parent hasn't done their homework and hasn't educated themselves, they don't have the answers.
Well, I mean, obviously obviously they could still be in a very similar position to the position that others are in. They might not want to. They might not have come to grips with the fact that their child has it yet. So if they do that late, I would personally find it, understandable that, you you yourself have to come to grips with it as a parent. And like, I think if you had a parent who had Asperger's and you did, it would probably be easier to talk because they'd have their personal experience.
If there was someone older who you could talk to who had it. So whereas a parent might be able to have those conversations you've just mentioned, if it's someone with it, then they'll have they'll have their personal understanding as well. Do you think if there was someone who was that little bit older who had that insight and understanding?
If there was someone in a school,
or even if they're from outside of school, but someone not family related,
someone who isn't family related, it would depend on do you want to talk to other people or as a whole? Do you want to sort of keep it shut away, which I tried to do for years? I can't say it will end well because you have to accept it at some point, but if you've accepted it and you want to just sort of
that's my door.
Keep it to yourself and you don't want everyone to know other people. Yeah, as I said, it does depend on, do they want to talk about it as a whole, really? I think that's the issue you're obviously going to get. Something that happened a lot throughout early time in secondary school was people would assume I got special treatment. In the end, I gave my RE teacher, of all people, to give and support, and you'd think this would be for a P4C lesson, but no, because I'm just like, okay, if you want to do a lesson on this, you can, because I'm just like, right, let's try and clear things up a bit. And I think because I gave her the consent to, I think it cleared things up for a lot of people who would assume that I got that. Because in a lesson or two before, he asked if I'd come up and talk about it briefly, but after the lesson she said, I could do a lesson on this if you want. I'm just like, okay, yeah, sure, you can do a lesson and this will be, and you've got my consent to. Obviously she asked me some questions about personal experience of it. But yeah, that is why it depends as to whether you want to talk to people, even if they haven't got it, but they can possibly give advice because they've been related to someone, or they have that view of, oh, you've had special treatment, or you've had this, or you've had that. It very much depends on that sort of thing.
Yeah, I was thinking along the lines of, if I was young, I was trying to put myself into, when I was a teenager, would it have been helpful if I had been diagnosed? Would it have been helpful? My family wouldn't have known anything about it. And they wouldn't have, there wasn't, especially back in the 90s, there wasn't books on it, really. So there wasn't the internet. There was no easy way of finding that information out. So I was thinking, back when I was a kid, I probably, I'm a very curious person, I love knowledge, I want to know everything, I would have gone out of my way, I think, if someone said, anonymously, this person will talk to you. So I wouldn't have wanted to make, myself stand out as a nice bullying target of, that weird kid is walking to that room that only the weird kids go to kind of thing. I wouldn't have wanted that. But if it was there's this guy, youth worker, or there's this older student, sixth form student or whatever, he's got the same thing as you. He can share his experiences, what's helped for him, what challenges he's faced. I think I probably would have gone with that rather than talking to family.
Yeah, that
would be guessing.
No, but that's understandable because obviously back then there wasn't a term for it, which you obviously described. So yes, it does sort of depend on the person, really.
Thank you for talking to me a second time. Hopefully this time it's all worked.
Yes, hopefully this time it will work because I'll be sending you my footage just in case.
Then they can give it a thumbs up. People can comment below, somewhere down there. They can comment below and they can hopefully nip over to your channel and subscribe. And nowadays, us YouTubers have to keep telling people, make sure you press the bell so that you get notifications. Yeah, so thank you.
Hmm.